Good evening. My name is Malcolm Laydon, and this is a personal log as well as an introduction to my company. I'm the CEO and joint owner of the Laydon Corporation's enterprise. Together with my older brother Hank, little sister Evelyn, and cousin Frank, we run one of the largest self-funded organizations in the world. I'm not here to show you flashy cinematics. I'm here to educate you on what actually goes on in our facilities, as well as the secrets being kept beyond the restricted sectors. Let me start by saying, we are not the government, although we are government-backed, which means that we are authorized to experiment with and create things that could help in the fight against the creatures of this world. Mostly, we are unrestricted in our ventures, but sadly we do still have to answer to them at times. All right, I think I better start off at the very beginning so you won't get confused. The Laydon Corporation was started in 1967 by my grandfather, George Laydon. Back then, it was government-funded as an off-the-books part of the National Intelligence Division that was itself shrouded in secrecy. My grandfather built the first facility, the one I mainly prioritize, our bio facility. Being the leading biochemist and neurologist on the planet, that's where I do most of my work. In Grandfather's time, the company was more about the capture and research of the creatures we know today as cryptids. He proudly started with just a handful of specialists at his side and paved the way for the company to grow into what you see or don't see today. Grandfather had two sons, Bill and Stephen. It was when those two joined the company that things began to change. Stephen, Frank's father, was the oldest. However, unlike his father, the boy had a certain aptitude for mechanical and electrical devices. At first, that led to unique specialized equipment that Stephen had built himself. But later, he would start the Laydon Cybernetic and Robotics X project and founder the facility we still use for the same purpose today, somewhat modified by Frank now, but still Stephen's original design. Bill, his younger son, and my father followed in his father's footsteps as a biochemist, eventually surpassing and gaining several awards for his groundbreaking discoveries in the field, with the most notable being in gene splicing. He made the first ever surviving hybrid clone, decades before its time, a trollman named Subject 1. Raised in early incubation cells, the gray, leathery-skinned giant grew quickly into a monstrous abomination without control of its inner cryptid. The creature eventually became feral and had to be eliminated. Dad never gave up, however, creating several more surviving hybrids that mostly ended up like the trollman. Frustrated with his failures, he turned to other matters. Then one day, he met a woman with the answer to his problem. My mother. She was a beautiful and brilliant neurologist. After just one meeting, they became an unstoppable duo. You see, my father's problem was, the creature's soft tissues became more unstable the older it got, causing all kinds of organ problems. He knew why, but didn't have the expertise in the right subject to fix the issue completely. Nobody did at the time, until she arrived on the scene. Miss Barbara Musgrave, the new face of neurotech industries, but not for long. This was about the same time the Laydon Corporation was becoming noticeable in the media. Bill had been under scrutiny for some time, but when Barbara heard about his exploits, she just had to meet him and put her thoughts into words. Father was clearly captivated by her at this meeting because he showed her everything he had done without hesitation. Then, within the next few weeks, she had accepted a job and was working side by side with Bill. They managed, after 2 more failed attempts, to raise the first hybrid that wasn't affected by the problem. Subject 19, a half-lizardman, with a much more human look than any of the others. However, he gradually degraded into a full lizardman over the course of 2 years, which wasn't fatal, but hardly a total success. Something else had happened between those two by then, though. A romance, birthing my older brother Hank, and putting me on the cards as well. For some time, Mum was out of work, and Dad, well, he contented himself with another project, one he began years earlier, and one that would become the start of the Mental X project, which Hank now oversees. After I was born and nursed out of diapers, Mum returned to the lab, and for the next few years they tried several more attempts until, in 1993, they decided to try something new. Dad was a genius for his time, that's not under scrutiny. But in my opinion, this was a costly yet simple mistake. The problem was he had always used creature-based materials to build the DNA sequence, as well as a human embryo for the host, except when splicing two animals. The human tissue was too weak to completely integrate with the other DNA, which caused the degrading issue. What he needed was stronger material to bond it with, or to use a creature's embryo. It's a simple feat these days, but back then they were in a trial and error loop. By the time they figured out a way to do it and acquired the needed materials for a trial, our little sister Eve was already a toddler, and Mum had become distant from the family, totally immersed in her work. However, the trials worked, all of them, and 5 newly born or hatched hybrids were conceived. They were obviously overjoyed with their success, and so were the military. The power a creature like that could unleash on a battlefield was a tantalizing prospect. This is where the company, namely my father, disagreed with them. You see, the hybrids were born unlike the others he had created as babies. Not in incubation cells. 3 were hatched from dragon eggs, which my mother acquired somehow. Even my father didn't know how she came about them. And the other 2 birthed from surrogate mothers, using dragon DNA. These babies had much slower growth rates than the other hybrids they'd created. Faster than normal, but it would take years before they reached adulthood. The military didn't want to wait that long, and pushed for the children's growth to be accelerated. My father refused outright, stating it would endanger their lives. Mother disagreed, but he held out, causing the government to retract funding. I remember that period of time. They worked separately for months, and us children only seen them alternatively. This wasn't really a problem. Being as famous as they were at that point, the company easily funded itself. And with all the new advancements, especially from Stephen's technology and mechanics sectors, that it wasn't much of an issue. The biggest issue at that point became my mother. She had been distant for years, even from us children. After Eve was born, something in her changed, or so Father told me. I don't really remember much from that time, being only 8 years old. I do remember only seeing her on evenings, and that was rare. She spent weeks at a time on expeditions to places that Father would never talk about. And then it happened. 4 years after their birth, the hybrid children had progressed better than expected. Now at around the equivalent of a 10-year-old, the government attempted once more to coax Father into boosting them to adulthood, which he once more refused. However, this time they weren't taking no for an answer. They couldn't directly force him to do this. His work was far too valuable to them to have him refuse cooperation altogether. So they used a more underhanded approach. My mother. She secretly issued the hybrid children with growth hormone boosters, one after the other. The first one became sick after some months. The hormone hadn't boosted its growth, but triggered a transformation into a less human form. The child began growing dragon-like deformations, and because he was one of the surrogate babies that looked more human anyway, it eventually passed away. Father was confused as to what was going on, blaming infections, disease, anything but her. I think he knew, but he just didn't want to believe it. Then weeks later, another one of them showed the same symptoms. One of the egg hatched, and more dragon-like children. Father almost went crazy, tirelessly trying to fix the issue. He brought the child, named Drogon, and put him into isolation while studying him. He managed to fix the issue with growth digression shots eventually, but it had taken its toll on poor Drogon. He was physically morphed into a half-dragon, and with it had gone his sanity. The other children were given the same treatment, and Mother was fired from Laydon Corporations and also from her position as his wife. After that, the disgraced neurologist disappeared, and I've never seen her since. Father was left with the problem of what to do with Drogon. He told the other hybrids he had died, but in secret. He built the underground holding facility, and that's where all of our mistakes and uncontrollable assets are imprisoned today. By then, myself and Hank were both working for Dad. Hank was better suited to running the business side, while I was more like them, experimental, staying in the shadows and working on my own projects. Lots of things were happening in the company at that time. Father had accepted a bargain with the military to open what we call the Hunter program, which is just an extension of what we already had, except they were just mercenaries until then. They were also allowing the hybrids, now in their late teens, to undertake missions for them. Father also established 2 new programs, the X-Physical and Mental X projects, one to enhance the body and the other to study mental powers. He had so many programs that he was never in the bio facility, and I was basically running it myself. He spent a lot of time with a child he'd found in Poland. The girl was uniquely able to see the future in explicit detail. This intrigued him immensely, and he found himself captivated in studying her. She was his first mental X patient. That wasn't just a clairvoyant, and the reason he started it in the first place. Everything was great for a while. We each had our own agenda. Hank oversaw the financial affairs, which he excelled at. Father was busy with his own projects, taking Eve along for the experience. Stephen retired, and Frank took over his work. I ran the bio facility and had my own agenda that we will discuss shortly, but everything ran smoothly. Then the hybrids shook things up. They suddenly disappeared on a mission. After taking down a terrorist group's hideout, they ran. The military and the company hunted them together for the next 2 years. But sadly, my father would never see their return. It was nearly 2 years since they went rogue that it happened. My father had studied all kinds of things, from cryptids to demons. I knew that, but I didn't know until it happened that he had a holding facility for such creatures. Underneath a number of our facilities are specialized holding cells for things that require further study or that cannot be contained by physical means. It was from one of those cells that my father's assassin broke free. Subject 117. Father labeled all his study subjects, but 117 was different than any other. A dark demonic entity capable of physical contact, as well as the ability to infiltrate the body of any creature and destroy them from the inside out on a molecular level. The containment unit under the Mental X facility was a work of art, constructed by Uncle Stephen and my father's combined efforts, yet it still managed to find a way out. When it did, it left nothing but bodies in its wake, including Bill. All 14 of the staff on duty that night were murdered. The only survivor was the young Polish girl Marta, who only said. I told him it was going to happen. Since then, I kinda took charge. Hank had a long mourning over father and didn't want to have full control of the company. Eve was just coming into her own as a doctor and physician, and Frank was now fast becoming known as a technological genius, building all kinds of robotics, including a military contract. We even had our own defenses and android guards, thanks to him. Eventually an entire force to rival an army. But in the background of it all, I was leading the company's direction as CEO, and I was ambitious. Still am. The hybrids had ran because they wanted freedom. I was able to coax 2 of them to return with a deal, but the other refused. It took another 5 years to capture him, and he would not make any deals with me. I was forced to place him in the prison facility instead. I admit, at first, I was overwhelmed with the responsibility of running all the facilities Dad had built, and asked Hank for assistance. He obliged, and took over the Mental X facility at his own choice. He had a bit of interest in that field, so he opted for that. And he was fine by me. I just wanted more time to pursue my own studies. Eve was doing well as a doctor. Frank was excelling in everything he did, and Hank was always busy. So I was free to undertake the experiments I'd been working on for years. Now I need to backtrack some time and explain what I'd been up to since running the bio facility myself. Because my father's not the only Laydon who's a genius biochemist. Following Father's research, I studied further into the biology of different creatures in an attempt to pinpoint similar characteristics in their genomes. I had the idea that splicing several creatures that were similar in structure would stabilize the problem Dad had had without using dragon eggs, because dragon eggs simply are not easy to acquire. I'd conducted several experimental trials with tissue samples under the microscope and gotten amazing results. But it wasn't until Father passed away and I became CEO that I eventually had the freedom to undertake a real attempt at creating a hybrid. Father had tried many different gene mixtures: human and animal, human and cryptid, animal and animal, cryptid and cryptid, but it had always just been 2 sources used for the mixture. I advanced that by using 3. My first creation was a bust, a highly mutated creature formed from a rabbit, a lizard, and a frog. It had to be put down after just a few weeks. However, I learned a valuable lesson from this first attempt. Amphibian DNA was a strong bonding tool to mix. The creatures I forged using frog DNA in my next few attempts turned out a lot better. I mixed it with human and cryptid DNA, using it as a bond for the splice. It worked like a dream, you might say, although those first few creatures followed a more animalistic nature. They were basically animals, running on raw instinct only, no more intelligent than a common pet dog, and their accelerated growth made for a quick expiry date. This didn't deter me at all. In fact, it only served to make me more determined and more ruthless in my experimentation. I started trying different mixtures, sometimes with 4 or 5 samples in the mix, and produced many astounding creations, and some not so successful ones as well. The successful ones that retained a high enough level of intelligence became the first of my assets, while the others were contained in our holding units as subjects. We had an extensive network of cryptid hunters in our ranks already by then, including some unique individuals, both from the Mental X and X physical programs, as well as the team the Dragon Hybrids had established since their return. But they were falling faster than I could create them. So, with all the pressure from the military to produce more unique soldiers, I decided to give them what they wanted. If I couldn't create them fast enough, I'd conscript them instead. The government had a treaty with the beast folk colonies. They had done for decades. They provided us with samples for study and kept themselves hidden. In exchange, they left them alone and provided protection. I convinced them it was in their best interest to let Laydon corporations take over as protectorates for the beast colonies. They agreed after much debate, when I promised I'd be able to get the beast folk to train as elite soldiers. I did, initially, manage to convince some of the beast folk to join up, and so I built a new facility, the Beast Folk Academy. But as time went on, I couldn't keep up with their demands. And with less and less of the Beast Folk joining up, I had to do something drastic. I started to force conscription on the rebels among the colonies, making any that spoke out against us to join by force. Certain other programs were also pushed forward, causing some major problems for us in the long run. I had also had a breakthrough with my gene splicing studies around then, and began making more higher quality creatures. I'd come across a certain similarity while reviewing results from previous tests. I'd figured out already that frogman DNA was more bondable with human DNA than normal frog DNA. But what I hadn't realized was the frog DNA had reacted nicely with troll DNA, making an even stronger bonding agent. Once I realized that, it took me weeks to start using frogman with troll DNA, and found I could bond any DNA structure like that. It was miraculous. Every damn test was a complete success. I began a line of assets then. Every creature was bigger, stronger, more durable, and more intelligent than the last. I found I could mix many different creatures at the same time, creating some seriously ugly abominations. But every one survived and was capable of intelligent thought. For some, that was to my undoing. Many of them became unruly, turned against me, or refused to work. Some even became criminals and had to be locked away in holding. The ones that didn't, however, became really impressive agents, keeping the government off our backs indefinitely. They loved the thought of somebody else dealing with things for them, I think, because more and more cases were being pushed in our direction. Still are today. Yet still, I had an issue. The more impressive the creature I created, the worse its attitude was. All the stronger ones were the ones I had had to lock up. The ones that became agents, however impressive, were the weaker of them. This was not an easy problem to fix. I had to somehow dull its aggression without pulling intelligence. The solution to this was one that took me several years to accomplish, and one that hardened my disposition considerably. I worked tirelessly, day after day, night after night, for months on end, racking my brain trying to find an answer. I became obsessed and ruthless in my judgments in other matters. I saw them as nothing but trivial distractions from my goal. When a creation stepped out of line, he was severely punished, sometimes even taken as test subjects. The same went for the academy. I even went as far as to overrule my older brother with one of his own mental ex-subjects, forcing them to become an asset for me. Of course, when Hank found out, he was enraged. He stormed into my office and threatened to expose everything we did to the public, while strangling me with the tie I was wearing. I gave him back his asset and eventually agreed upon terms. We came to the agreement that I would have no authority in his affairs, and he would have none in my own. This suited me, as all he really ran was the Mental X facility, as well as the business itself, of course. But this was what we both needed, and I learned something about myself that day. Our little fight had been a mirror image of our parents' disagreement over the hybrid dragon children. Hank had played the play it safe role my father had similarly taken, whereas I had been my mother, harsh and with a nothing stands in my way attitude. After that, I actually did calm down, and when I did, I stumbled upon the answer I'd been looking for. I discovered that the problem was there was no way to succeed the way I was doing this. The intellect was going to be lost no matter what I did, because emotions are a reaction to something that happened. The only way to get around that was to take out its ability to react, or at least react in certain ways. This still seemed impossible until I got an idea from one of our Evelyn's papers. She'd been studying the effects and structure of the autistic mind, with this big piece on how they focus in on one specific task and master it perfectly, while discarding other skills almost entirely in some cases. This gave me an idea. If I could forcibly make the creature autistic at the highest level, then in theory, I could train it any way I wanted, and if all goes well, the thing will excel at the task. So that's what I did next. Spliced up a high-quality mixture of creatures, surgically imprinted the autism into its DNA sequence, and let the magic begin. At first, I thought it was another bust experiment. The small, sluggish creature did nothing but slither up and down its incubation cell. It quickly grew, though, and became my masterpiece. Its growth was accelerated into adulthood without a hitch. I had it only learn combat and battle techniques, trained it to be a hunter and nothing else. The experiment was more successful than I could have hoped. Sliver was everything I'd expected, and more. He followed orders without emotions of any kind, ruthlessly completing missions without remorse. He went into the field, and for 2 years almost, he exceeded every time. Then, on a long mission, chasing a female terrorist for the military, something happened. Sliver was found on a mountainside in Alaska, unconscious. He was brought in and treated, but we were unable to wake him from this strange slumber. He was trapped in some kind of induced coma. I tried everything to wake him, from shock therapy to exorcism, but nothing worked. Sliver just would not be risen from his own mind. I've tried many times to recreate Sliver since, with far less astounding results. It seemed I had the perfect mix that first time. So now I've caught you up to the modern day. Well, mostly, I've just told you about the bio facility, really. I've only briefly mentioned the others. But that's because, like I mentioned earlier, I spend most of my time there. We have many facilities, all across the globe. They're mostly part of Frank's Laydon cybernetic branch, but we have plenty of others as well. I already mentioned the Mental X facility and the X physical facility. We also have medical facilities, a biology research and study compound, the Holding Cells facility, the Beast Academy, and so on, all unique in their own way. I'll start with the Mental X facility, since it's where my father ended his days. The building is much bigger now than it was in Father's day. Hank has modernized it with the help of Frank, bringing a once small building into a fortified facility, capable of rivaling my own biolab in splendor. There, as I've said, he runs the Mental X program for people with gifted minds. Underneath the main building is the entity holding units. These holding cells house several demons and nasty spirits that we wish we could destroy, but have been unable to do so despite much effort. The X physical facility is completely different from any of our others. Owned by Laydon corporations, but it is also a military base. Since the program really took off in 2015, gaining amazing results with several enhancement projects. The military moved in as protectorates of their investment, as if we were helpless. I didn't refuse them for one simple reason. Most of the test subjects were soldiers sent by them, looking to become an elite force. So I let them do as they pleased, but retained complete control over affairs to do with the programs. And our medical buildings are few in number, but they house many strange phenomena, ranging from test subjects to people with unique but unstable abilities. Evelyn has taken a special interest in these facilities, and has become a great help in understanding the physical and psychological effects on these patients. I wish she would agree to run them for me, but she consistently refuses me, saying she would mess everything up that Dad built. My cousin Frank is a genius. His cybernetics department accounts for almost 70% of our company's annual revenue. He's created all kinds of mechanical devices, both for public use and military alike. Frank's androids and weapon systems are what the Army are using in almost every venture these days. I cannot complain one bit. We also have an extensive force of our own from Frank's robotics factories. Laydon Cybernetics is definitely the face of Laydon Corporations today, but Frank, like myself, also has a Black Book program. You see, Frank and me share one core trait. We both cannot stop pushing the boundaries of what is possible in our own fields. He sometimes even shocks me as to how far he's willing to go in the pursuit of advancement. He'd already started to dabble in integrated mechanical limbs, making fully functioning synthetic arms and legs. But he didn't stop there. He was too ambitious for that. If he could integrate full limbs, why not the rest? He gathered many subjects, mostly accident victims from military conflicts, and rebuilt them in his workshop. He created cyborgs, and with amazing results. The problem was, some of them were near-death victims that didn't give consent. A few of these people were actually unhappy about being saved and sued us. Then Frank was ordered to cease the cyborg program. However, under the radar, he was backed by the military and continued his studies, as if he was going to stop anyway. That's all the front facilities accounted for, but we have more, and ones even the government don't know the location of. Besides those mentioned, the bio facility and the science and research buildings, we also have the Beast Academy and a containment holding facility. Both of these are Black Book programs of my own, along with my hybrid program, the Hunter program, and my X projects, which I admit keep me more busy than I can handle on occasions. I'm a busy man, that's true, but I keep a tight schedule mostly. Things have gotten out of hand more than once, if I'm honest, but I always manage to regain control. Because when it comes down to the crunch, I'm willing to do just about anything it takes to keep this company together. That's why I'm the CEO, because Hank didn't want that responsibility. So I took it on and followed in our family's footsteps. I know Hank is also trying to further some of Father's work, which is good, because that kind of thing is not something I'm all too familiar with. His interests are in the unseen phenomenon. My interests lie in the tangible and how to manipulate it. But getting back on topic, I'll start with the Beast Agents Academy. The academy is built straight into a mountainside. It started as an underground facility with little security. Now it has extensive security and is visible from outside. The place is well hidden in a secluded valley and is inaccessible by land for most vehicles. I had to make it that way when the military put pressure on me for more super agents. I was forced to conscript and contain them there so they wouldn't leave. It wasn't my proudest moment, but I had to do something to keep up with their demands. It runs now, more like a prison block. I have hundreds of agents, either trained or in training. They don't leave the compound unless on a mission. I can't afford to have them running and being seen by the public. Our last facility is not like any other. It's completely underground, below the sands of the Great Basin, a few kilometers from my own bio facility. It's unmanned, except for the entrance guards. The rest is ran by an AI system that Frank built, and guarded by androids that are constantly being upgraded by Frank himself. As I've said, Frank is a genius. His system has never had an issue in the 12 years since he installed it, and we've had no problems containing any of the occupants. The prison holding facility has ran immaculately ever since, allowing me to easily contain my mistakes and anything else that we wish didn't exist. The only way into the facility is through a fortified titanium hatch, concealed in a canyon valley. Nobody gets access without clearance from either myself or Frank. His AI system recognizes only the two of us as authority, and can only be accessed by voice, retina, and fingerprint scanning. That means it requires both eyes, all 10 fingers, and my voice saying a specific phrase that I won't divulge, for obvious reasons. That's about all I can tell you about our facilities. Most of them are unknown to the public. The ones that aren't are the business side of the company, that I don't take much part in, really. Hank deals with the financial side. I just have to keep up appearances as CEO, but we do extremely well thanks to my brother. We also have shares in plenty of businesses, which aid to our funds. They're mostly companies that trade in our own products, such as Frank's gadget range. That combined with the military contracts myself and Frank have, and we do more than all right. All right, so now we get down to the interesting part. Our Hunter program and the assets. The Hunter program was the original starting point for the entire company. Grandfather used it as a way to collect information and samples to study. It's come a long way since then. What started as a dozen mercenaries became an unstoppable cleansing army. Father started something when he built those dragon hybrids and let the military use them as super soldiers. Now, it is up to me to continue where he left off. As well as the few hundred mercenary hunters we now have, I've also collected a fairly extensive force of elite teams from the Beast Academy, our own X-Project subjects, and Frank's cyborgs and mech warriors. As if that wasn't enough, I have my own hybrid creations. These assets undertake the contracts we get consistently from the military, and any others I require of them. I've collected a fair few these days, assets I mean. Some are amazing and give me results every time. Some, not so great, and consistently give me cause for concern. I continue to build on this foundation, creating more assets every year, and have accomplished great feats already. But I have a feeling that there's a lot more in store for me yet, and that my troubles have barely scratched the surface. But you'll just have to wait and see for yourself. Just delve straight into one of my asset stories. I'm sure you'll find them to your liking. I'm Malcolm Laydon, and this has been my personal notes. End log. Thank you for watching the story. I hope you have enjoyed the show. Please support the channel. It would be much appreciated, and hopefully you'll drop by again. Until then, peace.